winding down. We're in the final stretch. We're going to just take a few minutes and talk about what we referenced this morning. I invited you to ask for feedback. We're going to talk about giving feedback, and we're going to keep it high level. I know you know of it, you know the importance. I just want to emphasize a couple major points, and then we'll keep giving you tools. The reality is feedback is just not given as often as people think. We think we do it more often than we actually do. Feedback is telling people where they stand. I mentioned you looked in mirrors already today, and it's because you have the natural human desire to know how you look. And we all have the same desire to know how we are coming across, how we're performing, how we're doing on the job, how we're doing in relationship. So this is feedback, right? Okay. What makes it feedback?
Not lighting up with your expectations.
Well, it begins with clear expectations and how you're doing in relation to expectations. So this is also known as exceeding expectations, right? Okay. But it's no different, and it's exactly how we operate, only we don't get it enough in our jobs, in our relationships, even in our lives. I have a great friend, CJ. He said, I love this line. He said, I decided to lose weight, so I went out and bought a scale, because he wants to know how he's doing in relation to what he weighs. A little bit, employees will not tell you they want feedback, but they perform well, they thrive well, just like they do around expectations. Realities around feedback is employees don't always see how they're doing. Those are blind spots. They do know how they're doing, but they don't see the connection to outcomes, to their job performance. Or it's a blind spot, or they see the connection, but they don't know how to change. And in all these ways, we can help them. So giving feedback, and I would stress giving feedback is past, it's either in the present or the past. Think of it as a rear view mirror. Coaching is looking forward, and we'll have a few mentions about coaching in just a few minutes. I really encourage leaders, and again, remember we had the second slide this morning. I said this is simple, it's easy, it's not complicated, and sometimes people think it's beneath them. I really encourage leaders, the senior-most leaders, to prepare to give feedback, even if it's strong feedback, wonderful feedback, but especially when it's difficult feedback. I encourage people, what can I do here? I encourage people to grab their notepad and just begin with, Tom, I'd like to provide you some feedback about your work on the ABC project. Because this is important, I've taken time to write down some notes for our discussion. Boom. What did I just do? What did I just do?
Set the stage for the conversation in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because it's important.
Because it's important. I use that word. It's important because it's important. I've done what? Prepared. Yeah, I'm honoring Tom by letting him know. And I'm also giving myself permission. I may look down. I may refer to what I've written. I may, and I've seen really good leaders, senior people, polished people, fumble through giving feedback because they think, I got this. I don't need to prepare. I don't need to look down. And there's nothing wrong. Remember, humility. Humility is the posture of all leadership. There's nothing wrong with having a few prepared remarks before you deliver a message. This does not have to be like employment terminating feedback. This is just how they're doing in relation to what's expected. And, what we know about feedback is we don't give enough of it, we don't give it timely, we don't make it meaningful, we don't make it specific. If you turn with me, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but look on page 15. I gave you this as a reference. We're not going to read each one. But let's look at the first one, the poor feedback. Hey, thanks for updating the project plan. It looks great. That's poor. Look at the middle. Thank you for organizing the project plan. Updating the tasks and dates makes it easier to understand our progress and the overall project status. I also appreciate the way you highlighted the high priority tasks in color so we can keep them in focus. Okay, what's the difference? What do you notice?
More specific. Specific detail.
More specific. I can actually see it. It paints a picture. And what else does it provide? I heard it. The impact. It shows the outcome, the result. Yeah. We'll do the second one. We'll do the last one. Kevin, you're weak at leading meetings. I want to let you know how you came across at that meeting. You didn't follow the agenda. I saw you add new events to the school's master schedule after we begun confirming the calendar dates, and you left Amy and Phil without any clear details about how they can submit date requests. See the difference? It's that easy. Notice visually, just everyone, all eyes up here, visually. This is bad feedback. This is improved feedback. There's not much of a difference. It's a difference in about 5 seconds versus 15 seconds. It's the level of detail we give it, the importance we give it, and that's what carries forward the meaning. So prepare, make it specific. Lost that. We looked at those examples. Top 10 reasons, did I put those on yours? Why feedback fails? Yep. We don't devote enough time to it. We use vague language. We deliver it too late. We focus on the personality, not the behavior. We pass it along unconfirmed. We pile it on. That's especially true of us as leaders. Using more examples than necessary. We try to look at motives rather than behavior. We often don't factor in enough input. Heavy focus on negative rather than positive. And rushing through it. We all know when we receive feedback delivered rather stiffly. I'm going to ask you to take a look at, so also the same page. What do you know to be true about yourself about giving feedback? What page is that? I took mine apart. Page 9. Is that right?
Yep, very bottom.
Yeah. I'd like you to just go through that real quickly for yourself. Not going to ask you to disclose it. What do you know to be true about you about giving feedback? So I'm not going to focus any more on that. I want to take about 5 minutes to talk about something I spend an afternoon on, and that is coaching. And give you everything you need to know about coaching is on that reminder card. How's that sound? Okay. Coaching is the most predictable process to change behavior and achieve desired performance on teams, in organizations, with individuals. Coaching. Coaching is forward-looking. Coaching focuses on what needs to be accomplished and how the employee is doing in relation to it. So it has an element of feedback, only coaching is forward-looking. I want to show you I'd like your eyes up front just to show you the complexity of coaching. I say coaching follows Kouzes and Posner's model of to mobilize, to get others to see possibilities, take action, get results. And when we coach, we put the responsibility on others for them to perform as expected. These are some models, and I just took them off Google Images, and just notice it is fuzzy, but an 8-step coaching model. I don't know what that is. That looks like something organic. There's a coaching model with stop, starts, yes, no. That's a 10-step coaching model. Multi-step coaching assessment. One with a star and a circle and a rectangle. 5 steps, 8 steps. I'm going to give you a 3-step coaching model. How's that? Assess, challenge, and support. It's that simple. And it begins with this card. Coaching, I already said coaching is the most predictable way to change behavior. The single most effective way to coach is to open a coaching conversation by inviting the employee to lead the discussion, by simply asking, and here's the magic phrase, walk me through the progress you've made on your work since we last discussed it. What action have you taken? What results are you seeing? That's it. That's it. What'd you just do? You just put the responsibility on the employee. He or she is going to summarize back to you their self-assessment, how they're doing. It's their chance to blow their own horn. It's their chance to take credit for what they've accomplished, both in action as well as results. And it's the most dignified way of having a conversation, by inviting them first. After that, then you weigh in and you give your assessment. And it sounds something like this. That's the way I see it too. Or, I see it differently. I don't see your performance the way you've just assessed it. And let me explain what I see. Because we always make it behavioral, we always make it verifiable, observable. But if you can incorporate this question, or if this doesn't feel conversational for you, find your own version. But begin by a coaching session by inviting the other person to self-assess. Walk me through the progress you've made since we last talked about your work. What action have you taken? What results are you seeing? And then be quiet. You will empower, you'll transform, you'll hold them accountable. I'll tell you, my boss Gary did this with me for 15 years. You better believe after a few times I had no business coming to my meetings with him unprepared to do what? Walk through the progress I'd made since we last met, what action I'd taken, what results I am seeing. A couple times he said, Tom, I noticed you haven't been prepared to walk me through the progress you've made and the action you've taken, the results you've seen. Now you've got another coaching conversation. But this can guide you. And on the back, because it wouldn't be a good reminder card if it didn't have something on the back, are more questions. Questions to elaborate, questions to confront, questions to reframe, questions to support. So the model is assess, challenge, and support. Once you lead with assess, then it's just dialogue. Then it's just, yeah, that's how you're doing, or no, that's not how you're doing, or what resources do you need, or how can I help, or what's next? What are you going to do differently? What are you trying that's not working? It's a lot of things. If you want, I can send you an entire handout of more coaching questions. But part of what we're trying to do today is talk about your leadership and mobilizing you and you mobilizing others. So we just did a little bit on giving feedback and coaching. Thoughts, feedback, questions? What are your thoughts? Will that work for you to begin holding a coaching conversation? Okay. Isn't it amazing how much of life can be summarized on a card, a reminder card? Fits nicely in a pocket. Yeah. Okay. I know what you came for. You came for the conflict. Because you're all in conflict and you want help getting out of them. So we're gonna move to that. Wherever you have relationships, we have conflict. It isn't that we've got conflict, it's when we leave conflict unaddressed. That where it grows out of control, where it results in pain, it results in hurt. So I want to talk a little bit about some secular ways of addressing conflict, and that are very proven in the field of mediation and conflict resolution, and then some more spiritual and healing and reconciliatory practices around moving forward. The 4 ways that mediators work at in resolving conflict, and mediation has a lot to do with either sometimes you think of staying out of court and settlements, financial settlements, but I don't do that. I do mediation that reaches agreements. And the key is separating the people from the problem. Recognizing the person is not the problem. The problem is outside of the people. The other is focusing on interests, not position. So if Jason and I have a matter to work out, it has to do with our interests in getting a matter resolved, not his as chancellor and mine as layperson. And the same can happen with pastor and principal and faculty and office manager and staff. We let go of our role, of our title, of our position. Not just our hierarchical position, but our where I stand position. And we focus on mutual interest. When we're working through a problem, we invent options. We invent options that would advance the situation, that would make it better. And then we use criteria. We, saying that, that's not something we would use. That is something we would use. I'm going to ask you to turn to page, just had it. Well, we're on 10 and then going on to 11. I'm jumping around a little bit. This is going to be deceptively easy, but this is how mediators work. It's this simple. So I'm looking at the top of page 10. We ask the very simple question: what challenges or issues are we facing? And we let the parties talk. We let the parties talk. Let them talk freely. If it takes 15 minutes or it takes an hour, we let them talk. So by this time, each party has spoken. They've said what their issues are, their challenges are, and it'll come across as complaints or feelings of being mistreated. It'll being offended. It'll be all things, but everything is out. Then the next question, as simple as it sounds, is what would you like to see improved? It is the most enabling question, because now they've said everything that's at issue, and now you're asking them to name what they would like to see improved. Everything will change. Well, I just want to be treated fairly, or I want so-and-so to, do this work. So move from naming the issues. You can't start without naming the issues. Then you have to ask the question, what would you like to see improved? And then the third question is the most powerful one, and it's so simple. What would make things better? That question shifts people from dwelling on what's wrong to only being forward-looking. I have seen it happen in business people who hate each other. I've seen it happen in families. I've seen it happen in marriages. I've seen it happen in parish work. They get all the grievances out. They identify what they'd like to see improved, and then you just ask the simple question, what would make things better? And they just start coming up. So I won't tell you the process as mediator, because it can be drawn out over hours. But those questions, that process of what are the issues, what would you like to see improve, what would make things better, will absolutely transform a conversation and a relationship. We do some other things. We work on agreements. What can you agree to? What will you not agree to? And we find common ground. I've done that recently in church work, here for the diocese, where the two parties could agree what they wanted to be, what they wanted to accomplish, what would make things better. They were at odds, but they could find common ground, and then we work out agreements, and I facilitate that. And I'm not trying to describe a process as if it sounds secretive and behind closed doors, but that is exactly the process I follow, and anybody can follow. If I were to give you a couple other tips, one is always sit on the same side of the table. So if I have conflicted parties and it's hard to do at a round table, they're going to sit on the same side. They're not going to have a table between them. Now, they're going to have space, but they need to see themselves as actually being on the same side and working it out. They may be facing in on the table, but they're not going to be across. Let's see. Separate people from the problem, put people first, define their difference in thinking, if there is a difference, give them a stake in the process. I'm just summarizing some of these. Number 8, avoid thinking that solving their problem is their problem. Avoid thinking that solving their problem is their problem. They are to name the interests. They're just to name the problem. They don't have to solve it yet. There's too many points on this slide. Focus on interests, not positions. Invite them to express their interests, their issues, their concerns, their viewpoints, their ideas. Where they're compatible or comparable, name them. Sounds like you both have this in common. You both want what's best for the students. You both want what's best for liturgy. You both want what's best for the facility. So discuss mutual interests. We've already talked about active listening. If you are creating proposals, they're only just that. They're just proposals. They're not solutions. They're just what we're putting on the table. Focus on shared interests, and when the parties' interests different, seek options, and it just sounds like this. So what's your proposal? What'd I do? I asked a question, I stopped talking, I opened it up for conversation, and I'm letting the parties work through it. So what's your proposal? There's an entire book written called So What's Your Proposal? Invent options, and this is where anything is a possibility. We put it down, also known as brainstorming. Anything is a possibility, but we, rather than judge it as we go, we put them all on the table. I've spent 5 minutes on this, I spent an hour on this, and we get all the options on the table. We invent different options, we don't decide options. And finally, use some criteria. At the end of the hour, at the end of the day, at the end of the semester, by the time we have the data, these are some standards around which we'll make a decision. I worked with administrators recently where we decided before a certain time in the school year came that we would have some agreements. When they're opposed, use something that's either the calendar or time-driven, or that will meet the requests of the board or the parents or the students. So it has to have criteria. That's more of a layman's, secular way of facilitating or navigating disagreements or conflict. I want to now talk about conflict. Conflict where it's very serious around people's life. And there's some great practices around mediating and reconciling and healing that we're really going to focus on in our last few minutes here. All conflict is in the heart. All conflict starts and remains in the heart. And you've got really good materials on this. And we either have a heart at war, where we're carrying around our feelings, our anger, our sadness, our despair, our discouragement, our feelings of betrayal, and that's where conflict is. Conflict starts in the heart. And then we also have hearts that can be at peace, and that's what people truly desire. So when I work with parties, I've worked with entire parishes, I've worked with councils, I've worked with boards, I've worked with faculties. This is the advice. It is this simple. Move away from your heart at war. Notice your heart's at war. Notice it's bothering you. It's brewing up. We're obsessed by it. We're disturbed by it. We're losing sleep. It's interfering with relationships. When we move away from attacking, disapproving, holding on to being right, holding on to being wronged. I would say I see people holding on to being wronged more than I see them holding on to being right. Could you understand that? And they also love to hold on to being hurt. And hurt is very real. We know people have been hurt by the church, by families, by spouses. But when we hold on to it, we're clinging to a heart of war. And as the slide says, when our hearts are at war, we're not at our best. We can't see things clearly. We can't consider other opportunities or positions. We're not in a position to solve. We end up actually hurting ourselves and hurting others when our hearts are at war. And that's true of light conflicts, it's true of deep conflicts. We poison ourselves. We poison our outlooks toward life, we poison our outlooks toward people. In a very small way, when I had you discussing actions that build trust, and then I had you discussing actions that break down trust, the energy level in the room was higher around breaking down trust. There was a little bit of adrenaline, there was a little bit of enthusiasm, there was a little bit of pursuing it, because that's the way we are as a society. We look at salacious news. We look at something, for someone to fail. We look at something to not go well. And that's our heart at war. That's our hearts at war. So I work with teams, individuals, to move to a heart of peace. Move toward noticing and taking responsibility for contributing to the conflict. Taking responsibility for our actions, which can include apologizing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Forgiving. And I can say this in a faith-based group, for inviting God to be part of what we're experiencing, to help change our hearts, help change our outlook, change the way we're navigating through conflict. When we move toward a heart of peace, it is freeing. Worked with 2 parties in conflict about 6 months ago, 8 months ago. We got all the issues on the table, the conflict. And then I talked about what would make things better, and they named those things. And then I said, what would you like to see improved? And they named those things. Then I asked, what would make things better? This one party came up to me at a break, because we weren't done. She said, I already feel better. I already feel better letting go of my heart at war. I already feel better moving toward a heart of peace, talking about what might improve and what might make things better. And we must continually ask this question. It will change every conversation. What would make things better? I know it looks like it's a 5-word question, and it seems like such ordinary language, but it will change the direction and the hearts of people in conversation when you ask it. I challenge you to go back, and where there's conflict, where people are coming to you looking for, especially, don't let people look to you for solutions. Even if you're a trained mediator, I don't provide solutions. And by the way, I've never seen anybody win an argument, ever. I've never seen anybody win an argument. But I've seen people move their hearts from a heart at war to a heart at peace by asking the question, what would make things better? Because they'll tell you. They'll tell you. We must spend more time, focus, and effort in helping things go right than dealing with things that have gone wrong. The energy will just amaze you. I worked with a very large group recently. The group was at odds. We spent a considerable amount of time, several hours, and in that group they came away saying, that question transforms the way I look at my life in this parish. Working on making things better humanizes us. It moves us away from the dark, it moves us away from the hurt, it moves us away from the painful. This sounds so obvious, but I can't put enough emphasis on it. Overlook minor offenses. People keep track of being slighted and being offended. We worked through with an extensive group about all the things that they were holding on to that were light offenses. I see heads nodding. Overlook clears the way for dialogue, overlooking, and it's not a passive process where I'm just forgetting. It just means I'm making a conscious decision to no longer let that comment, that glance, that gesture, that absence, that response, that email make a difference. I'm just going to overlook it. It's very freeing. I've seen it happen right in front of my eyes. Overlooking is an active process that we experience through God. It's inspired by God. God has been overlooking our offenses for eternity. And it's a very simple way of doing it when you're in conflict with friends, family, coworkers. Yeah. To truly overlook an offense, as the screen says, means deliberately deciding not to talk about it, dwell on it, let it go, and develop pent-up bitterness. In fact, I want to talk about apologies, but more important, I want to talk about forgiveness. An apology for a leader is the most powerful, healing, restorative gesture a leader can make. It says humans, but a leader. It is what people will respond to most. And it's what they will wait for longest. An apology, as we all know, because we've apologized and been apologized to, it admits mistakes, states an intention to change. That's really important. Most importantly, it creates a new, deeper connection about what we want for the future, about people and about situations. Marshall Goldsmith, the inventor of Feed Forward, says that the apology is the most underused practice by leaders. That and an apology and admitting we were wrong. There's 5 steps for a sincere apology. I think that's in your handout. Sincere, simple, 4 steps. Sincere, simple, specific, and selfless. It has to come from the heart. When it does, it changes everything. It doesn't offer excuses. I'm sorry or I apologize are the purest forms of apology. Great apologies name the offense. They focus on how we messed up, what mistake we made, and what we'll do in the future to prevent it from happening. We don't make guarantees, but we commit humanly. It focuses on the person, not us. And a great apology seeks to make things right. You've all heard a insincere or incomplete or ineffective apology. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. And then what follows? But you really upset me. There's the justification. I should have kept my mouth closed, but she asked for it. I know I was wrong, but so are you. But and if never have a place in an apology. I was once asked by a leader if in the course of talking to his staff, if I would let him know who he should apologize to. And it doesn't work that way. Because an apology comes from the heart, and we look at our hearts and we decide we have to take a look at who we've offended and who we might owe an apology to. 12-step programs have people make amends and make apologies to those we've hurt and those we've offended. We cannot have anyone else name who we should apologize to. Even though I had a pretty good idea, it wasn't my job. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is moving closer to God. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it's an active, conscious choice. We have some actually very good practices we know around forgiveness. The church has a beautiful sacrament, and outside the sacrament there's still some very beautiful human practices we know about forgiveness, and when we do it, it makes it meaningful. It involves a decision, not just words. It involves a decision to change ourselves and change our hearts. It's not forgetting, because God gave us memory for a reason. We forget for a reason and we remember for a reason. It's not excusing. It doesn't need an excuse. It's both an event and a process that we engage in deliberately. And I know you know this, but it's the most important way for me to end our time together as we talk about conflict. To be reconciled to me means to replace hostility that we're holding, that we're walking around. I compare it to a chain or a burden or a beam or a cross that we're walking around with. So, we've all been to reconciliation, or we've asked for forgiveness, and hopefully we've experienced God's forgiveness, and we know that God says, you know, Tom, I can forgive you, but we really can't hang around much anymore. We're not going to be able to get along like we used to. Sorry. That's not the way God forgives. But we can forgive in the same way. And there's 4 practices to forgiving that are the most powerful that I've ever witnessed. Forgiveness can be 4 promises. The promise that I will not dwell on this incident. Wow. I will not. I'll let it go. The second is, I will not bring up this incident again and use it against you. Wow, that's freeing. The third, I will not talk to others about this incident. This is beautiful. And the last one is, I will not let this incident stand in the way or hinder our relationship. This is as close as I can describe, as words can describe, how God forgives us. When we can do this, we can transform a relationship where there's hurt, where there's betrayal, where there's darkness. And I've seen it happen. I've seen an entire group, a room, pray and commit, I will forgive, using all four elements of these promises of forgiveness. I will not dwell on it. I will not bring it up with you and me. I will not talk about it with others. I will not let this incident come between us. That's all we could ever ask for in forgiveness. Okay. Once you're out of conflict, we're out of conflict, others are out of conflict, we keep doing the same thing. We keep focusing on what will make things better. It will work with your faculty, it will work with your parish staff, it will work with your pastor. It won't be solved until we move to a heart of peace. Okay. I'm going to wrap up here with my closing remarks. Today was billed as a day around professional development and around leadership. We've tried to tie it back to some of what you may have read if you've spent any time with the Kouzes and Posner material. Plus, I tried to bring some other simple tools and practices. I will be the first to say we did not cover anything new. I said that early this morning. It was 1% training and 99% reminding. We talked about the importance of giving feedback. We talked about the importance of asking for feedback. Talked about the giving feed forward. Talked about the beauty of humility and the power of curiosity. We talked about the transformational phenomenon of dignity. Talked about the very simple practice of coaching. We talked about the process of hearts at war, hearts at peace, moving toward healing and moving toward forgiving. Leadership is not complicated. And I get invited in usually to hear about it at its most complicated level, and I listen. And I'm sure you hear that too as principals, administrators, as office managers, as pastors, as leaders. You get invited in at the complex level, but most things do not need to be solved at a complex way. They're really simple tools of dialogue, of listening. Everything you put up on that last polling question of what would make things better. I know many of you in the room know of my wife Mary. When Mary was really sick, she had a lot of treatments. She had some appointments where we went in and thought we would get good news, and we got good news. And we went in to get news, and we got bad news. Meanwhile, we had really good friends. John and Beth are their names. And John and Beth and Mary and I were close friends for about 15 years. Friends who would have each other over regularly. It'd be a Friday afternoon, we'd say, how does pizza and beer sound? And we'd get together for pizza and beer. Or it'd be a weekend and we'd say, thinking of doing a barbecue or making a pot of soup, and would you like to come over? We just did constant things together in each other's homes, and we went out. And then when Mary got sick, lots of times we had to turn down the invitations. Mary wouldn't feel well. And John said something, he'd call me and say, we're going to go here, we're going to go to a movie, you want to come? I'd say, well, Mary doesn't feel well. Right? He'd say, thought we'd stop over and just bring some rolls and coffee. Mary's really not up for visitors. And what happens when you get invited and you sometimes have to turn things down? What goes through our minds? What do we worry about?
Stop inviting.
We stop getting invited. We stop getting invited. So John was talking to me one time, and he said, we got the best idea. We got this best place we're going to go to. I said, I'm sorry, Mary doesn't feel up to it, and it's not going to work. I said, I feel bad. We always keep turning you down. And John said one of the most powerful things I've ever heard. He said, it's okay. We'll just keep inviting you. We'll just keep inviting you. Who doesn't want to hear that? So it really is just the ongoing, continual use of these basic things we've talked about today. Asking for feedback. Giving feedback. Asking out of curiosity. Just keep doing it. And if people don't respond, keep doing it anyway. Just keep inviting, 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 inviting. You will be changed as a leader forever when you become the leader who asks for feedback, who gives feedback, who suspends your certainty to make room for what other people know, and who coach simply by inviting people to tell them how well they're doing. You will become a transformed leader by just doing the simple things. Keep inviting, inviting, inviting.